Oh, when last we left off, I could not find what I did with this breather tube, this little check valve device. So I was able to locate that. That just goes through this hole here and then gets pushed down onto a nipple on the fuel tank. And this is like a one-way check valve. It actually won't allow anything to escape out in this direction, but if vacuum is drawn on it, for instance, if, say for instance, you had this sitting in the sun and you brought it into a cool place and it needed to draw air in to the tank, it could do so through here. Where this goes, I know it just loops up over the top like this. I don't think there was anything really holding this in place. I think it just kind of flapped around loosely in here. I might have to double check that, but right now I'm going to leave that be. I'm going to put the fuel filter on because I'm worried I'm going to forget. So I'm going to put that on now. That's a matter of fishing that end of that fuel line out of the tank and pushing this onto it and then popping it back into the hole. Next up, I'm going to install the muffler. I already got the muffler already on the studs. Just going to get this screen into position, and then this little cover, which has to go on. You can tell by the all the black and everything that the cover must go in this way. All right, so next up, guess I'll put this rod assembly back in. So now would be a good time to figure out which side of this fuel line this wire should be on. Alright, quick look at the carburetor. My adjustment screws are all on this side, and this is where the holes are to get the screwdriver in, so I know that the carburetor has to go on like this. So the impulse line hooks up to here. So this is my fuel inlet right here, and it faces that way, which means this hose has to do kind of a funky, kind of a crimp deal like this, I guess. Is that right? Must be. This must have to sit down in here like this. Wait, how does that not kink? That's messed up. Is that sitting there like that? Wow. Uh-oh. It almost appears as if this is designed for this to sit in here like this. The problem is, if I do that, this line is kinking really badly. That is weird. So I don't know if you can see, but right in there it's kinking really badly. And even if I pull this out, it doesn't do it. That doesn't straighten it out. Huh. Uh-oh. Alright, so here's the fuel line that was on here when I got the machine. I don't know if it's the original one or not. There is a number on here, 38, and then on the other side here it looks like it's 0.1127, and there's a little symbol there. That's the only markings on it that I could see. So I don't know if this is an original Stihl OEM part or if it's a cheap replacement, but it is different diameter than this hose here. So if I take them out and I look at them side by side, this is a little thicker in spots than this one is. This one doesn't appear to have any markings on it whatsoever. I did notice that if I play around with the way it's turned right before I put it into position, I can get it to go in there without kinking too badly. I think that's what I'm going to have to do. This one doesn't seem to, it seems to have a more natural curve already in it, and it doesn't seem to notice how this one doesn't tend to want to kink as much until it's a really extreme bend. So temptation was to put this one back in. The problem is this one is definitely not serviceable. It actually looks okay at first glance, but if you take this and you bend it like this and you look at it real close, I don't know if that's going to focus or not. But what you can actually see is you can see all the little tiny cracks in the rubber to indicate that this is no longer serviceable. I think it's going to be easier for me to install a carburetor with that rod, this plastic rod off. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in this little metal piece here. This sticks into that little plenum or manifold. It's what actually keeps it from crushing down on itself, I guess. And that kind of clicks in. And then we have this strange metal washer, which almost defies logic as to what this does. I guess that actually acts to kind of support the outer side of the manifold. So I guess when you screw the carburetor on, what'll happen is it'll push on this metal ring in the middle and cause this to swell out, and since it can't expand out because the ring is going to keep it captive, it must push it up against and help make that seal on the intake. That's just a theory. Putting the carb on couldn't be easier. We slide it on and we just make sure that the little fitting on this side slides into the impulse line. At the same time, on this side here, it's simultaneously the fuel input fitting is sliding into the end of the hose. And now the carburetor is installed. Now I could put on that rod. So this line here must go over the top here. Let's see. Figure this out. Pop this down. Alright, so that's the off position. That's the on. Yeah, that's working. Okay, so that's the on start full throttle position or whatever. Oop, I don't think I'm supposed to go that far with it. Yeah, so that's on. That's choke on. There we go. That's on full throttle. Choke on start position. So this has to go into here. Alright, so I can't remember for the life of me whether or not this little thing stuck out on the side like this. But I think I've got this in correctly, even though when this flips over, this part right here doesn't perfectly line up with this. This looks almost like, to me, like it should go this way further, but the diameter in here is just large enough for the wire. The larger diameter for this clip part right here, this barrel part, actually ends right there. So this cannot go over this direction further. So I think that's correct. And then this just snaps in here to retain that. So if I flip this into the off position, it does appear to be making contact. It's just not. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much where it should be. That looks pretty good. And what I could do is I can actually check with my ohm meter. I can actually get on that connection right there and that connection right there. But I can tell that that's making contact. I forgot to hit the record button, but I just did check, and I do in fact have no spark when the switch is in the kills position, and I have spark when it's in the run position, so I'm satisfied with that. So now let me see if I can get this linkage hooked back up correctly. So that's pretty straightforward. Just turn it on its side, bring the hook, the end of the hook in from the back side of the plate right here on the throttle shaft through the hole, hook it down like that, and then on this end over here, just pull the trigger forward to expose that slot, and the other end of the linkage snaps down into that slot. Alright, so this cheese bag Chinese kit came with a brand new air filter assembly. But this was on here when I bought the saw, and this actually looks like it wasn't very old at all. And it looks really clean, so I'm just going to put this one back on. So, should be pretty straightforward. I'm just going to make sure that this part right here slips into this rubber gasket right here to make a seal. This is interesting. This is the spark plug that was in the saw when I got the saw, I think. It's a Champion CJ8. Okay, and this is the cheap, no-name Wang Chung spark plug that came in the Wang Chung rebuild kit. And this is a L7T, and it just says WX on the other side. But if I look at the two side by side, the Chinese plug clearly has a longer reach down into the bore. So this plug definitely looks like it was for an application where the piston comes up really close. So to me, it looks like it'd be a situation where this plug belongs. If you put this plug in, the piston might come up and whack that electrode and actually short it out. And if you're lucky, it doesn't do any damage. I actually saw this happen on an outboard I had years ago. Couldn't figure out why the plugs that came with the engine when I got it kept having problems with the plugs, and realized they were the wrong plugs. And what was happening was this electrode here was getting bashed down to the internal center electrode. So, of course, I just did that all out of frame, didn't I? Anyways, this one sticks out further than this one. Question is this not a good plug for this saw? Or is this a plug that I stole from something else, or somebody else put in this saw before I got it and doesn't belong? Let's find out. Alright, so Champion Spark Plugs has a nice online cross-reference help you find your plug. And I've dialed down through. I went into the small engine category. I told it I was looking for tree service type of stuff, that I was looking specifically for chainsaws, that I was looking for Stihl, and now I get to model number, and this is always annoying to me when you get this kind of situation here. I have a choice between an MS290 or an MS290 56.5 cc 3.8 horsepower. Well, did I just select MS290 and it went away? It did, didn't it? Oh no, wait a minute, okay. Oh, I see. Search. No results found. Oh, that's hilarious. That is hilarious. Now let's see if I hit the back button, if this thing's going to let me just go back. Or do I have to start all over again? Kidding me, right? Yeah, I do, don't I? Of course. Application type, lawn and garden. Equipment category. Saw and tree equipment. Equipment type, chainsaw. Make, Stihl. There is 290. We know that didn't work, so let's try the 290 55. So 56.5 cc. Blah 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 blah. Search. No results found. Are you kidding me? Wow, what a useless website. I don't know why, but I ran that same search again with the MS290 with no suffix or anything, and this time I got two results came up. Easy Start Spark Plug, part number 5852. They're calling that an RCJ6Y. This is a CJ8. This is going to be a different heat range, I believe. What's the other result? Copper Plus. Oh. Same thing, RCJ6Y. So this is an RCJ8. I think the 8 versus 6 means it's a different heat rating on the plug. I might be wrong on that. Sure somebody's going to chime in. All right, that's interesting. It's an L7T. Oh, all right. So notice the longer body on this plug right here. Apparently that means that this has a higher heat range. I think that this profile here is better suited towards saws or other two-stroke engines that have the type of orientation where the piston, the top of the piston's coming up this way, kind of like right up to the plug. Okay, sort of like I think on my MS190, my small saw, and probably on some backpack blowers, which might be where I stole that out of. I don't know. Don't forget I got a backpack blower that needs rebuilding too, possibly. But just to illustrate, here's the old cylinder, and you'll notice that this goes in at an angle. Okay, and there's actually plenty of space up inside there. So when the piston comes all the way up, there's no danger of this plug sticking in too far and hitting that piston, hitting it, as opposed to like if this was threaded into a hole right down on the top and went right down inside here, then if there wasn't as much room, that might be a problem. So I think I'm just going to install the new cheapo Chinese plug. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this stud back in. Alright, so that's all set. For the time being, I'm not going to bother putting the bar and the chain on and this cover on, and I'm not even going to put this bark biter on because that thing is sharp metal and it's a menace. So especially with the bar off, and this way I could just, you know, try and start it, test run, all that, and if it seems to be running okay, then we'll put the bar and chain on and we'll do some test cuts. So the last thing I have to do before I can attempt a start, well, actually the last thing will be to put fuel in, but one of the last things is I'm going to make sure that the two adjustments on the carburetor here are preset to their starting positions, which for the low end jet is quarter turn and the high end is 3/4 turn. All right, just fueled it up. It's probably gonna take quite a few pulls initially to get the carburetor primed. Wonder why I gave one little sputter and quit. Well, I just checked and I still have spark. Interesting. No way. I think it's the spark. I have spark when I test it with the spark plug out, but the spark looks weak to me. It's not a good blue spark. I think I might have the gap on the magneto, the ignition coil. I think I might have the gap between the ignition coil and the flywheel set improperly. when I had to take it off again to switch the wires around, I think I may have not gapped it properly. It just, spark does not seem like it should. And I got a feeling that when it's under compression, the spark is extinguishing. So I just checked online for some guidance as to what to set this gap at. And of course, there's a special tool from Stihl, which is just like a large feeler gauge with a plastic piece on it to make it easier to hold on to in position. And some guys online said that they have the tool and they measured it and that it was 0.2 millimeter. Another guy said it was marked 2 millimeter, but he probably just didn't see the decimal point, because a lot of guys are saying 0.2 millimeter, which consequently is 8 thousandths. Another guy had an older manual for an 035, an older saw, and said it said 8 to 10 thousandths. So I think 8 thousandths will work. So I got two feeler gauges, two 8 thousandths feeler gauges to help me position that magneto. We're going to try it again. And sure enough, they talk about that if I don't have that gap set correctly, I could definitely have weak spark, which is going to give me trouble. It's been raining on and off all day today, so I was looking forward to getting out here and trying to get this started. And now it's clouding up and the winds are picking up again, so I think rain's moving back in. I'm curious what the gap is right now. I can almost get a 17 thousandths feeler gauge in there. 16 goes in a little tight. Yeah, got that gap set way too wide. What the heck I was thinking. I went through so much trouble the first time I put this thing in, setting the gap. Then I had these wires behind here in the wrong position, so I had to take this out to reroute them, and for the life of me, I don't know why I decided to do that, but I did not reset the gap. You know, this wire, that connector seems a little loose too. Maybe I should snug that while I'm in here. Let me get some needle nose pliers and just snug up this crimp connector just a little bit. Seems a little loose. Oh, just to clarify, I didn't mean the crimp where the wire's crimped on to the spade lug. I mean there's a little spade lug here on the coil that this slips onto. That's better. I want to see what the spark looks like. A minute ago it didn't look weak, but it just had a bad color to it. It had a orange color, which is not a hot spark. A hot spark is going to be bluish white, and if the spark is not right, what can happen is while it's under compression, it can actually snuff out instead of igniting the fuel. I don't know. Sounds like a load of malarkey, but I'm just telling you what they say around the water cooler. Yeah, that spark looks hotter now. Honest, it does. It looks like a white spark. All right, cross my fingers here. I'm even going to put my hearing protection on. I feel that good about it. Oh, come on. Really? Well, gas is volatile enough. Well, it's starting to sprinkle out, guys. I just don't get it. I got 100 and, well, it's dropping a little bit, but that's probably just a bad seal at the O-ring here. But I'm getting 120 PSI compression. I mean, that kind of compression and spark, and throwing fuel directly into the cylinder. Why is this thing not firing? I don't get it. As it starts to rain. It's raining on my parade. You know how weird is it that I had that one little puff when I first tried starting it and then nothing? Well, guys, it's the following day, and I got a few quick things to report before we go out and try and start this thing again. Yesterday, it started raining pretty heavily, so I had to give up and come inside, and I was pretty disgusted because I couldn't get this thing to even, I popped off once, and that was it, and I just couldn't figure out what the heck was going on with it. So I brought it down here to the workbench. I apologize for not having video on all this, but I was just getting kind of disgusted, so I ended up opening this up again, and I played around with the gap on the ignition coil. I also checked those connections again. They seem to be okay. Then what I did was, in order to not have to put this pole starter mechanism on every time I wanted to check and see if my spark had improved or whatever, I came up with what I thought was a brilliant idea, which was I used my impact driver. I put a socket on it, and I used my impact driver to spin the engine with the spark plug out, and I had it wired up so I could check my spark. Now, the first shot I tried to do that, I forgot that, well, as you could see from the pull starter, this side, the flywheel, actually goes counterclockwise, which means the nut tightens like a normal nut, clockwise. So as soon as I went to try and spin the flywheel in the proper direction, the nut came right off. So I was like, oh, okay, obviously I can't do that. And then I was like, well, how am I going to do this? And then I thought about it, and I realized, wait a minute, this is a two-stroke motor. All I want to do is check the spark. I'm just spinning it to check the spark. So this thing should care less if I'm spinning it in the wrong direction as far as the spark goes. So I actually put the impact driver on there and was able to spin it and watch the spark, and I played around with some settings, and I got what seemed like a pretty decent spark going. Before I did that, I had noticed that when I was spinning it, the spark was intermittent. So I'm not quite sure what was going on there. All I know is this: when I put it back together, and I think I set the gap around 12 thousandths, and I spun it and I had consistent spark and things looked good, I put it back together, and just for giggles, I gave it a couple of pulls here on the bench, and on like the first or second pull, it fired right up. So I actually shut the choke off, and it idled, but I only had it running for a few seconds before I shut it off because I was down here. I already had shut up the bulkhead and everything, and I didn't want to get carbon monoxide poisoning because that's generally frowned upon. As it stands today, I should be able to, I'm hoping I can just walk right outside and that this thing's going to start right up. Fingers crossed, right? Now, the other thing I did notice, though, was it whizzed out quite a bit of oil onto the bench and made a mess. So I was wondering whether or not I could shut off the automatic oiler just for the purposes of my testing with the bar off. So I went online and I checked, and sure enough, my suspicion about this hole over here is correct. It is an adjustment for the automatic oiling system. It turns out, apparently from what I read online, the E in the middle stands for E-matic, which is what I guess Stihl had for a name for the automatic or optimum oiling system. But if you set it to E, that's supposed to be set at the automatic position or the factory default, I think. And then if you turn it clockwise, which is interesting, I would almost think clockwise you'd be turning a screw in and that you would cut down the flow, but actually clockwise is to increase the oil output. Counterclockwise is to decrease it. So I'm wondering whether or not there are actually stops in there, whether or not I can feel a mechanical stop at the high and low point. Grab the screwdriver that seemed to work in this before. Yep, I am engaging the screw, and I got to tell you, I just tried turning it to see if it would stop, and it barely moved clockwise before it stopped, which would indicate to me that this was set at almost max oil, which is probably why I'm having so much oil come out of this thing. I noticed when I first bought this saw and I was able to run it, even though it was running horribly, when it would run, it seemed like it was excessive oiling. And I think that's what that was. So that's max clockwise, which intuitively one might think would be minimum oil output, but it's actually max. So let me see if there's a stop in the other direction. Tell you what, there's not much range of motion to this thing. So that appears to be the stop in the other direction, fully counterclockwise. So that should be minimum oil flow. And I'm going to leave it set there for my testing. All right, guys, I got to go upstairs, have a quick bite to eat for lunch, and then I'll be back, which will seem instantaneous in the magic of video. And we'll see if we can't get this pig to fire up. Oh, we got such high humidity today that bringing the GoPro from the cool basement up here to the outside to the humidity, it's actually fogged up the lens. And as if that isn't bad enough, it's still raining off and on. All right, let's give this a quick try. Come on. I can't believe battery's down on the GoPro and it starts pouring rain. My luck just isn't that good today. All right, let's try this again before it starts raining again. I can't believe there's a passing cloud with another shower. Oh. Alright, so I don't think the if I could put this hood on here, okay, protect my camera from the light rain. I don't think that fuel line is the problem. I know there was that slight kink I was worried about, because it seems to want to run wide open throttle, okay. It doesn't want to idle, and it bogs on acceleration. Uh-oh. This rain's getting a little heavier. Well, I got the camera kind of covered with a makeshift hood, so I don't know if it's gonna screw up the audio or not. Somebody really hates me. I can't believe it's raining again. I'm just going to stand here in the rain until it stops. So I guess I could take this time to update regular viewers of my channel, let you know what to expect for upcoming videos. Off and on in between working on this, I've been working on that steering column for the i350 International tractor. So I got another episode of that in the works. That may or may not post before this episode. Now we have bright sunlight and pouring rain, so there's a rainbow somewhere. Also, got a flea market find segment coming up. Got a couple of interesting items there. Got a couple of really good deals on some items. Let's try. Let's see. Quarter turn for low and 3/4 turn for the high. That's the starting position.
That's the problem.
No, I tried it at a quarter turn, it won't run. Try it at a quarter turn out again.
And you wonder whose fault it is?
That's a quarter turn right there. See, I won't start. It won't run. Won't run a quarter turn out.
It sounds better though, right?
That's a half turn. I'll put it back to 3/4 of a turn out. Full turn.